We are now on air. Time for a total takeover.
It's finally here. Welcome to a new episode.
It's about to go down.
I just got my COVID PCR test results back and I'm COVID positive. Here's the issue. I never showed up to the test. Yeah, my trip got canceled and I forgot to cancel my PCR test, so I just didn't show up. Here's the email I got today. Positive. Detected. And here's the time I apparently showed up, when they got my swab and when they reported, all on the 24th of this year. Meanwhile, I was at home. Somebody explain this.
Today, we're at a new stage in fighting this pandemic, facing an evolving set of challenges. We have to double down on our efforts to get shots in people's arms, country by country, community by community. Ensure we have reliable and predictable supplies of vaccines and boosters for everyone, everywhere. Expand access globally to tests and treatments. And we have to prevent complacency. This summit is an opportunity to renew our efforts, to keep our foot on the gas when it comes to getting this pandemic under control and preventing future health crises. Collectively, we're making significant new commitments to help keep up the fight against COVID-19 in 2022, protect the most vulnerable populations, and prepare for the next health crisis, because there will be others. And the United States is going to continue to do our part. Today, I'm announcing the United States will share critical COVID-19 technologies through the World Health Organization COVID-19 Technology Access Pool that are owned by the United States government, including stabilized spike protein that is used in many COVID-19 vaccines. We're standing up a new pilot program, working with the Global Fund to expand access to rapid testing and antiviral treatments for people in harder to reach areas. And we're increasing our support for a new pandemic preparedness and global health security fund that will be established at the World Bank this summer with $450 million in seed funding. I particularly want to commend Indonesia and Italy for their leadership in helping make this fund a reality. And I'm encouraging other leaders to join me in upping their commitments. We're going to face together global health crises. This is not the last one we've had. It's not a question of if, it's a question of when. So we have to invest now. We have to secure political commitments now. We have to start working to prevent the next variant and the next pandemic now. And that's going to require all of us to do more. I encourage every leader to ask yourself, what more can I do? How can we work more closely together to help more people? How can we save more lives? That's why I continue to call on Congress here at home to take the urgent action to provide emergency COVID-19 funding that is vital to protect Americans, to make sure that we maintain our supplies of COVID-19 tests, treatments, and vaccines, including next-generation vaccines that are being developed. The request also includes $5 billion to keep up our global partnership in the fight against COVID-19 and sustain our efforts to get shots in people's arms all around the world, expand access to treatment, and save lives everywhere. We can do this. We can control COVID-19. We can start to build a better, healthier, and more secure future today.
There aren't just health concerns from the COVID lockdowns, folks. A disturbing report claims the CDC bought data from millions of Americans' phones in order to track their compliance during the lockdowns. What is this, North Korea? Joining me now is cybersecurity expert Morgan Wright. Morgan, we always go to you for these cybersecurity questions. Is there anything Americans can do, Morgan, to protect themselves from being tracked on their phones? Or is this just a trade-off we have to make? I'm a little disturbed by this.
Yeah, it almost sounded like the social credit system in China. Look, Dan, the problem is the state of where we are with technology. Every application you put on your phone has this thing inside of it, usually called a software development kit. In those little SDKs are licenses that says, hey, if you use our app, because nobody ever reads the fine print, We can now track information, your phone's address, location, date, time. Here's my problem. Now, just back in March, a Virginia court, a federal judge ruled that the use of geofence warrants was unconstitutional. You could not just throw a broad perimeter around. I think this is going to have implications for what the CDC is doing. They're getting away by saying, well, we're buying private data. But, Dan, that private data exposes the most personal details of our lives, where we go, what we do, who's hanging around the Supreme Court justice's house, where do people go to dinner, where do I go shop at? This is not just simply surveillance. I mean, this is more than just surveillance. This is overarching surveillance. This would make George Orwell happy to know that, hey, we've got a system in place to where we don't need to put a chip in your arm or a chip in your head. You just carry around a phone. We can track you wherever you go. And by doing that, we can figure out what it is you're doing because we get enough data. We can figure out when you do these certain actions, this is what you're involved in.
Now, Morgan, correct me if I'm wrong, but when you buy the data, it's anonymized. You get a cell phone number. You don't get the name. In other words, you get a cell phone number. It doesn't say Dan Bongino's cell phone. But I'm not stupid either. It's not complicated to figure out where I live, find out where the data is. If it moves from my house at 9 o'clock every morning to the office where I do the show, you can reasonably figure out that that's me. Am I reading this wrong? It's really not anonymized.
No. It's not anonymous. All it is, the only thing it means is that it doesn't have subscriber information that goes with the data. But Dan, you exactly hit it. This was the case in Virginia where it was anonymized data, but they were able to track it based on where he went, what he did, get an address, match the person up to the address, and then subpoena the telephone company. Look, it's not really anonymous. There's no such thing as anonymous anymore. It's just how hard do you want the data and what are you willing to do to get it? And right now, what does the CDC need all of this information for? They have apps, they have health reporting. The doctor was just saying, look, they've got these reporting systems where you can do it. For what government purpose do they need all of this data? And by the way, it's not just for that. Once you get this data, Dan, and I know the government, they're just not happy with having it in one place. Now I can use it for 2 purposes, 3 purposes. When does it stop? When do we stop the mass collection of surveillance data? I'm with you. Look, North Korea, China, I don't want to end up like them. At some point, we have to tell the government, you need a warrant if you're going to do stuff like this, and it is unconstitutional to collect wholesale information on Americans simply because you want to do, disease surveillance? Look, there are other ways to accomplish it without being intrusive into our very private lives about where my phone is and what I'm doing with it and where I'm going.
Morgan, as always, thanks for your analysis. We really appreciate it. Great job.
You bet, Dan.
Thank you.
Aware of what we do, how we do it. I think you guys need to publish the list of all of the stash houses, the 501(c)(3)s, and publish the names of all of the donors to those people and let the whole world see who was, because they are the middlemen. They are there, and you may have legal issues or some other liability issues, but I sure as heck would like to know who's running 501(c)(3)s doing that kind of bullshit.
Thank you. Why don't we throw this question to Greg, who can talk a little bit about these organizations?
Yeah, you sort of read our mind. I mean, there's no question that we've been making plans. The reality of all of this is, of course, as you mentioned, there's lawyers and everybody else breathing down our neck. Fox's lawyers are keeping it off Fox, and there's just
say that again.
Fox's lawyers are keeping it off of Fox.
Fox News.
Period. And so what we've decided to do, at the end of this movie, if you get opportunity to watch it again, you can download it. You can Salem Now and on Rumble. And at the end of the movie, it'll cut to the True the Vote logo. Then it will go to a QR code. So just a little hat tip to our 80,000 friends here. Under that QR code is a short video that Catherine and I did to explain exactly what we're about to do. We call it the Ripcord. We're going to publish every single finding that we have, every single minute of video, every single conclusion, everything we have we're going to publish. And as you said, pull the Ripcord. Let's go. Let's do this. Let's fight.
Market, Dow Industrial's up 270 going into this number. It's going to be out imminently. The S&P 500's up 40. It's up 38 points right now, and the Nasdaq's up 133. We'll see what this number brings, but the April CPI data is going to move markets, and we have all hands on deck to go through. Let's get right to Cheryl Casoni with the number. Cheryl, what can you tell us?
8.3%, which is hotter than expected. 8.3%. That's the year-over-year headline number. Core year over year. That strips out food and energy. That's 6.2%. The expectation 6%. So again, these year over year numbers are hotter than expected. And again, we're watching the market. There goes the Dow. There goes the entire rally. All right, let's get to the month over month number right now. We came in at 0.3% month over month. That is hotter than expected. You strip out food and energy and you're coming in at 0.6%. Again, hotter than expected. To repeat, month over month, a jump of 0.3%, hotter than expected. Year over year, 8.3%. That is hotter than expected. The 8.1% was the expectation. Core month over month, 0.6%. We were looking for 0.4%. That's hotter than expected. Core year over year, stripping out food and energy, 6.2%. Let me give you some context, guys. A year ago, if you go back to this headline number, we're at 8.3% for April. A year ago, we were at 4.2%. We have doubled these numbers over the last year. Now, let me go back and give you some of the actual numbers and give you into the release a little bit here and to tell you specifically where we saw the increases. So last month, it was food, it was shelter. Now what they're saying as far as for the month of April, they're saying the pressure came in. Shelter, food, airline fares, and new vehicles were the largest contributors to the seasonally adjusted, the headline number increase. The food index rose 0.9%. Even just month to month, the food at home index rose 1%. That's month over month. A slight decline in the energy index, which has been, as you know, rising. The index for gasoline actually fell 6.1%, just month to month. Okay, just to be clear, I'm talking month to month. That is not year to year. But again, if you go into these headline numbers, and I'm going to send it back to everybody for reaction right now, but we always look at, and I know we were talking about shelter, the headline number, the jump in shelter, and I'm going to break this down after I toss it back to y'all. 5.1% year over year. That's the shelter increase, 5.1%. So sending it back to you guys for reaction. But again, there's your 10-year, and so much for the Dow rally, Maria.
Today, gas prices are within striking distance of yet another record high, just ahead of the summer driving season.
Yeah, these gas prices are absolutely insane. If it wasn't for my wife's boyfriend, Darren, I have no idea what I would be doing right now. Luckily, when he comes over, he lets me borrow his gas card so I can get out of the house and go fill up the tank and maybe get a snack.
The national average for a gallon of regular is now $4.32, up 18 cents from last month, and 1 cent below the all-time high set on March 11th.
Listen, I lost my job. I'm hurting, and every little bit of money that I have saved up is going to my gas tank. And they're giving $40 billion to the Ukraine. I wish Joe Biden would give me some of that $40 billion.
Fuel prices are being pushed higher by increasing demand and rising oil prices due to concern about less Russian oil entering the global market. And oil prices are expected to rise even higher when cities in China lift their COVID lockdowns.
I don't mind paying higher gas prices. If that's what I need to do in order to defeat Vladimir Putin, then I'll gladly do it for the greater good in order to protect our democracy.
Meanwhile, stock futures fell overnight on Wall Street. A turbulent week ended Friday with the market's 5th consecutive weekly decline.
If you're mad about this, if you're enraged, then number one, you're selfish, and number two, you're probably a white supremacist.
A leading research firm says, quote, "We expect inflation to peak this summer between 6 and 7% and to recede to 3 to 4% next year with no recession," adding, "We may have spotted the first signs of peaking inflation already."
I'll pay as much as I need to for gas as long as it keeps Donald Trump out of the White House. Do you see me complaining about gas prices right now? I'm working 7 jobs right now because I enjoy it, because it keeps Trump out.
That key report on Wednesday is expected to show the rate of inflation last month was below the 8.5% rate that we saw in March, a signal that inflation has finally peaked.
Remember the long lines you see in television? People lining up all kinds of vehicles just to get a box of food and they're drunk. How could we forget? People were hurting. And what does the MAGA crowd want to do? Forget it. Forget it. God, this is the United States of America. The idea that people would have to wait in line an hour and a half to get a box of food, and they're drunk. It's unbelievable.
The baby formula shortage is hitting families across the U.S. Our next guest wrote a scathing opinion piece saying, in part, political inaction on this issue could create a firestorm unlike anything we've seen to date. If it doesn't, our society is troubled beyond measure. Let's bring in New York Post contributor Bethany Mandel. Bethany, this is not an issue that all of a sudden happened. You've been tracking this for several months.
Yeah. I mean, the Abbott plant shut down in January, and we've been having supply chain issues for months. Senator Jack Reed, a Democrat out of Rhode Island, wrote an open letter to the FDA and the Biden administration exactly a month ago saying, what are you doing so that this doesn't get to a critical point? And here we are, middle of May, and we are now at a critical point.
The Abbott plant, is that the one in Michigan?
Yep.
All right. So,
yep. So
what is it doing now?
It's just sitting there empty, and we're waiting for the FDA to open it. The Abbott plant is claiming that everything is fine and they're ready to roll and they want to reopen operations, and they're waiting on the FDA. And that seems to be what's going on.
Okay, so you can't imagine if this were happening when I was at the White House, I would have basically poured gasoline on my head and threatened to light a match if everybody didn't get on board.
This wouldn't have happened if you were at the White House.
This is something, I don't know about that. I mean, you have crises, but problems come to you, you deal with them. That's why you have a cabinet. That's why where's Secretary Becerra? Where's the FDA commissioner? And also, where's Kamala Harris? I mean, when she asked the question, how dare they, when it comes to Roe v. Wade, well, how dare you not pay attention to the nation's mothers? Talk to me about this, too, because you hear some people say, well, you should just breastfeed. Why don't you just breastfeed? Or why don't you just make your formula at home? Like, that's not possible, Bethany.
No, it's not. I mean, I wish it were the case. I have a lot of experience doing this. It's not a faucet that you can turn on and off when you're breastfeeding. And the make your own formula, I wrote a piece for Deseret News yesterday that it's pretty dangerous. The formulation in formulas is such that it has specific amounts of nutrients and minerals and vitamins. And if you get those wrong, it can have deadly consequences. You can throw off the electrolytes of babies and they can be hospitalized. And I'm hearing anecdotal reports of that's happening. People are trying to stretch their formula cans with more water, and they're disrupting babies' electrolytes. But then if you're trying to make it at home, the other danger is that, while you're keeping your baby alive, you're creating deficiencies that are critical for brain development that they're not going to recognize until there is some damage done to their brain development, and you're only going to realize that a couple months down the road.
That's a very important point. You've got some allies. Tom Cotton's one of them. He says the shortage is a national crisis. He writes, hitting poor moms and kids the hardest. FDA needs to immediately step up, be transparent, explain how we'll get production restarted, and give parents a timeline. And the Biden administration needs to take this seriously. The piece you mentioned in Deseret, you say at the end, political inaction should create a firestorm unlike anything we have seen to date.
Yeah. I mean, if you look at how angry parents were about school closures, and we're seeing that reflected in the Virginia governor's race, and we're seeing that reflected in poll numbers around the country. If parents were mad about not being able to send their kids to school, wait until you have parents who are running around all weekend long to 6 different stores to try to cobble together enough formula to make it through the next couple days. This is, it's maddening and it's terrifying, and it cuts to the core of a parent's fear like nothing else. And the Biden administration's continual silence on this, and silence from not just the Biden administration, but from, most people in Congress. This is not on the radars of anyone that could be helping the situation, and there is going to be a significant amount of anger from parents on that front.
You conclude if it doesn't, our society is troubled beyond measure. That's your conclusion.
Bethany, I have a quick question. Do you think that America should be more willing to allow the importation of baby formula from other countries?
So 46% of our baby formula is already coming from China. So, it's hard to say that we should import. There are a lot of really wonderful European formulas that I know people illegally import. They mail them here. And it should be easier. The FDA should be making things easier on so many different fronts. They should be opening this Abbott plant. And we should be looking at other countries and other ways to bring in formula, because obviously, domestically, it's not cutting it right now. And the Chinese supply chain issue is such that, we've really cut off our supply.
Bethany, you're a strong voice for the issue. Thanks for coming on today.
Great
Bethany
mama.
Mandel. Yeah, thank
Great
you.
writer.
Good luck.
Great talker. Great to have you here. Thank you, Bethany.
Mike Walsh from Florida. Look, I think we need to take a moment and think about the fact that in Joe Biden's America, it seems like it's easier to get a crack pipe in a government-funded smoking kit than it is to find baby formula.
So let's talk about this, because I think yes and no. This is kind of where I lose their plot line a little bit. So if you have some more insight into this, I think it would be great to hear it. But here's the thing. Yes, I absolutely do believe that this is in large part about white supremacy and wanting more white babies to be born so that white people can preserve their majority. The problem is it's not going to do that, because this is disproportionately going to affect brown and black women who are less likely to have the resources to travel to other states or to other countries to get the medical care that they need. And thus, more black and brown women are going to be forced to give birth that don't want to give birth. And that's going to entrap more black and brown people into foster care, because black and brown babies are harder to get adopted. There are absolutely white women and white families out there that want to adopt black and brown babies for the virtue signaling and the white savior complex. But most of them are going to wind up in foster care, which I guess then would mean that more white babies for the white families to adopt and more black and brown babies to entrap in poverty so that they can be abused for their labor later in life, I'm guessing. But yeah, no matter what, it sucks and it's stupid.
President Biden has said that inflation is the #1 priority for the Biden White House to try to get under control right now. As you're out there in California talking to constituents during this re-election year for Congress, how does inflation compare to this newly important, in the sense of the Supreme Court decision pending, abortion issue? How do those two issues compare?
Well, I don't think they compare. I think they actually reinforce each other. So the fact that things like inflation can happen and it can become more expensive to feed your kids and to fuel your car is exactly why people need to be able to be in charge of how many mouths they're going to have to feed. So I think the fact that we're seeing this jump in expenses, that we're seeing people having to pay more in the grocery store, pay more at the pump, pay more for housing, is a reason that people are saying, I need to be able to make my own decisions about when and if to start a family. So I don't think we're going to see them. I don't think it's like about comparing them or contrasting them. I think they reinforce for people just how big of a responsibility it is to take care of a family.
A conversation
Some
that's
limitations, but not
yes, this is an
outlawed.
uncomfortable conversation we have to have. At what point does a baby in the womb have rights?
Listen,
separate from a
it
mother?
doesn't matter what you think, when you think it is. If I don't think that's when it is.
Is it the ninth month? Is it the third trimester?
But listen, I don't have to tell you.
It's none of your business.
It's your decision. Yeah. What you do with your body and how your family
It's
works.
a really
and for me, I don't care what your religious beliefs are.
But it's not even religion. It's
but it
really
is.
important
This is
philosophical
all based
debate.
in
When
religion.
When does the baby in the womb?
Okay, wait. Rob is freaking out. Rob is freaking out. Rob's freaking out. We'll be right.
I'm just surprised that we find ways to weave into every facet of our lives such an important and painful reality for so many people, to make it sound like it's just another 0.4% added to our labor force participation as a result of the issue of abortion. Just, to me, seems harsh.
Well, I certainly don't mean to say what I think the effects are in a manner that's harsh. What we're talking about is whether or not women will have the ability to regulate their reproductive situation in ways that will enable them to plan lives that are fulfilling and satisfying for them. And one aspect of a satisfying life is being able to feel that you have the financial resources to raise a child, that the children you bring into the world are wanted, and that you have the ability to take care of them. In many cases, abortions are of teenage women, particularly low income and often Black, who aren't in a position to be able to care for children, have unexpected pregnancies, and it deprives them of the ability often to continue their education, to later participate in the workforce. So there is a spillover into labor force participation, but it means that children will grow up in poverty and do worse themselves.
Thank you. Let me just say my time on the topic.
This is the truth.
I'll just simply say that as a guy raised by a Black woman in abject poverty, I'm thankful to be here as United States Senator.
I just want to make a comment real quick as we get into a topic dealing with justices, how easy it is for the other side to drift into a call of racism. And I'd like to push back on that whenever I can, because no, the Democrats of 1958 are the same party that's been responsible for 40% of the Black American deaths and abortions. 40% of Black Americans today are not here because of the Democratic push for abortion for particularly minority people. Democratic Party is responsible for the illiteracy in every single urban community around here. I think it's time for us also to recognize how Justice Thomas
yield for a moment?
Pardon? Let them just sit.
What did you mean by illiteracy?
When 75% of the Black boys in the state of California in 2017 cannot read and write, it's called illiteracy. And you go to Baltimore, we have zero proficiency in math. That's called illiteracy. Any place there's an urban community, you find illiteracy. And what bothers me, when you have Black Americans that are successful, how easy it is to demean us. Clarence Thomas is a great example of what can happen when you go from nowhere to the top of our society, respected by those who understand his thought process, the way he works. We have put down every single chance every single chance the other side gets to put him down, you'll do so. It seems that that's the way that it's a theme of any Black conservative that wants to speak up for the American way. And actually, I think it's demeaning. I think it's time for us to stop that mess. Let's talk about the policies, if you want to talk about policies. Let's stop demeaning people succeeding in this country.
Would the
have to be
gentleman
Black,
yield?
but don't have to think the way you do.
Would the gentleman yield?
Yes.
Do you think it's proper for a judge to accept a private plane ride?
I reclaim my time. I reclaim my time.
$19,000 Bible
I reclaim my
from
time.
somebody with
I reclaim my time. I think it's time for us to stop, instead of putting down those who succeed in this country, that gives our kids a chance to see that the American dream is alive and well for everybody. Let's stop the process of, because you don't like his ideology, because he's conservative, because he's successful, because you can tell the young people that he can do it just like he did, and I'm not going to yield anymore, okay? It's time for us to recognize that we give our young people hope. And I'm really sick and tired of every chance we get an opportunity like this, that this comes up where some kind of way there's an attack on the Republican Party that, by the way, is showing more success across the board, no matter what the color, creed, or race might be. You adhere to Republican conservative values of faith, family, free market, and education, and they will succeed. And that's what we're finding here. I think that's what's a threat right now for the Democratic Party. That's why we're losing. That's why you're losing the Hispanics and the Blacks, because they want hope, and they're sick and tired of being demeaned and put down, and their hope being taken away from them. I yield back.
What is it? I mean, what is the reaction by voters, I don't care, non-voters, ordinary folks, to a guy who is president and keeps telling you time and time again, every speech he makes on the domestic economy, it's not my fault. What does that tell you? Who said the buck stops here? Wait. A Democrat? Wait. Harry Truman. Right. It's the exact opposite of Harry Truman. But in all honesty, I don't care whether you're 21, 31, Democrat, Republican, Independent. You keep hearing stuff goes wrong. Inflation keeps getting worse, right? Real worker wages are falling, gasoline prices, diesel prices. We can go through the whole laundry list. Food prices. You can't even get baby food in the supermarkets anymore. The point is, here's the guy as president who says, it's not my fault. It's never my fault.
And then he cashed in, I guess, Madison Avenue. He said, I need a line. And they said, Ultra MAGA. It's Ultra MAGA. I'm really surprised. Excuse me. What does Ultra MAGA even mean? So Matt Gaetz goes, yeah, I'll be that. That sounds good. Other people go, I'm not sure. If you want Senator Rick Scott, Ultra MAGA, he's just conservative. You just watched him for 8 years as governor. You're seeing him for 2 years as senator. No one looks at him and says he's some crazy Marjorie Taylor Greene or anybody like that. You just, instead of just pointing out some people, he says the whole party has gone Trump. And then you say to yourself, okay, I'll take that. I'll take low inflation. I'll take high earnings. I'll take a high GDP. I'll take low unemployment. I'll take tax reform. I'll take that fight. But why are you mislabeling somebody Ultra MAGA? And he can't even get the words out.
I know. First of all, I don't think people know what Ultra MAGA means.
He made it up. Yeah, you were there at the White House. Did it ever come up? Would you like to be Ultra MAGA today?
Yes. Yeah, I proudly want to be.
But did you ever hear the term?
We're going to have Steve Miller on later in the show. I hated it that Senator Dick Durbin called Steve Miller the head of the Ultra MAGA movement. I was so totally jealous. I'm lock, stock, and barrel.
You like to be in it.
I want to be in it. But no.
So, sir, you're a neighbor of the justices, or of Justice Amy Coney Barrett, correct?
I am.
And how do you feel about the protesters coming to your neighborhood?
It's none of their business. Why are they here?
Do you think it's inappropriate for them to protest in front of the House?
Of course it is.
Do they have the right to protest, or should they be going somewhere else?
Yeah, they have the right to protest, but not in front of someone's house. Mm-hmm. They live here. This is where she lives.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So, do you have anything to say to the protesters?
Just what I just said. They shouldn't be doing this. Go home and get a family.
Charles Camosy has thought a lot about this over a long time. He's the author of Losing Our Dignity, How Secularized Medicine is Undermining Fundamental Human Equality. He's also professor at Creighton School of Medicine. He joins us tonight. Professor, thanks so much for coming on. I know that you were the first person we thought of when we saw this piece. Are we overstating what's happening here?
No, and first of all, thank you so much for covering it, Tucker, because it doesn't get a lot of coverage. And I think I have to wonder why. I mean, violence is something we hear covered ad nauseum. Everything today is violence, even things which obviously aren't violence.
Yes.
This is violence. This is medicalized violence. Why isn't this being covered? Why aren't we talking about it? Especially when it's poor people, especially when it's working class people who are structurally pushed into that. I think that's a question worth asking.
Well, sure. And there's this very difficult problem, which is what do you do when an economy based on finance starts to go south and average people, can't kind of sustain themselves? Do you do guaranteed basic income or whatever? This seems like an obvious choice for ghouls, neoliberal ghouls, like we'll just force poor people to kill themselves.
And how many times have we heard from Canada about their healthcare system, their social care system, talking down to us about so many things? And now it's come home to roost. Canada's policies are seen for what they are. And Canada has their own problems. We need to learn from this. We need to say, look, what's happening to our poor people, to our disabled people? The dementia population, Tucker, which we talked about the early part of the pandemic, is set to double in the next 20 years. It's going to triple in the next 30 years. What are we going to do? Are we going to put the resources into care for them? If we don't, I really only see two options, so-called robot care or straight up no chaser euthanasia.
Yeah. So why don't politicians just say out loud now? I mean, so many things we're seeing now we couldn't have imagined 10 years ago or 5 years ago even, and now they're commonplace.
That's right.
Killing yourself is not liberation. It's really sad. You shouldn't be forced to do it. Like, why does nobody say that?
Well, your show is an example of giving people a voice who have no voice. The people who are most dramatically impacted by this, the working class and the poor, don't have a voice. And so we need to decide. And it's so interesting to see the political realignment underway. Which party is going to be the voice of the working class, the working, and of the poor, to be on the side of people who say, I don't want to die. I don't want to die, but I don't see any option given what's been offered me. That's just diabolical.
It is diabolical is the word for it. And you've been writing about this for so long, and thank you for doing that. Professor, great to see you.
Thank you.
The internet has become a tool for children's education. A lot of students use the internet to learn. So how will the White House prevent children from getting misinformed from the internet?
Such a good question, too. Well, I know reporters like yourself and people that other kids listen to are good voices to provide accurate information. And you coming here and asking tough questions is an important part of that. I would say that, one of the things that we encourage parents to do is, make sure you are educating yourself on all of these platforms and what information is available, and working with your kids to make sure they understand what's accurate and inaccurate. There's certainly steps the government can take, but there's also an ongoing development of new tools, and we as parents need to keep educating ourselves about what's out there so we can make sure our kids have access to good information, informative information. We watch a lot of animal videos in my house. That's all good and positive, and not access to information that's inaccurate, misleading, or problematic.
Happy Tuesday, everyone. It's my favorite day of the week, except for all the others. Jimmy Fallon is here. Yeah. You don't have to clap. Oh, he brought his jacket. There it is. Must have been an estate sale. Hey. So as you know, talking about a stolen election can get you into trouble. It's the equivalent of shouting fire in a crowded theater, except you can actually shout fire in a crowded theater, especially if there's a fire and you started it. Even more, if you're a Democrat and you're about to become White House press secretary, something tells me you'll get a pass on this. Karine Jean-Pierre, sounds like the goalie for the Montreal Canadiens. Is that a real team? Well, anyway, she's been tapped to replace Jen Psaki. But did you know she once falsely claimed that the 2018 Georgia gubernatorial election was actually stolen? I know. Since when do Democrats care about theft? But I get it. When someone gets a fancy job, embarrassing tweets surface like a bloated corpse in the East River. I remember when this show started, someone started leaking these erotic videos I'd made back when I needed the money. True, I was the one leaking them. I just felt they needed a wider audience. But Jean-Pierre's tweet matters, because that sort of thing would disqualify anyone who isn't a lefty. Back on April 2nd, 2020, she tweeted, "Reminder, Brian Kemp stole the gubernatorial election from Georgians and Stacey Abrams." Of course, no Dem has called this an attack on democracy, a claim they're always making against Republicans. But they wouldn't know democracy if it bit them in their elitist butts. But she's merely echoing exactly what the Dems get away with saying already, which tells you it's only a crime if a Republican does it. You know, like marrying your brother. Who hasn't? You've married a lot. Yeah. Well, maybe only once. Never mind. You haven't heard much of it, but Stacey Abrams filed a federal lawsuit over Georgia's management of elections, and the trial actually began last month. You could say the lawsuit's an attempt to undermine the integrity of Georgia elections, but like a plane full of passengers during the safety demonstration, no one's listening. They're too busy trying to find gas and baby formula, which causes gas. Anyway, because she's a Dem, that stuff doesn't matter, mainly because the press is on her side. They go together like peanut butter and jelly, pizza and beer, nipple clamps and Cheese Whiz. And they want elections as secure as the border. Think about that. Now, as you know, Psaki's leaving her job to go to work at MSNBC, so she can now lie while sitting down. Now, if you don't know the network, it's the news station that makes the weekly world news look like Face the Nation. But I guess someone has to do the work they pay Rachel Maddow for. Because she's not. Thank you. Not working. Anyway, I want her job. I don't know if she's got a show coming her way, but I hear that her office duties will involve feeding Joy Reid and changing Lawrence O'Donnell. Half the duties she performed for Biden. I just hope Jen enjoys her first day at MSNBC.
Oh, hey, Jen, welcome aboard. Hope you're getting settled in. Let me know if you need anything, office supplies or whatever.
Well, the supply chain is a top priority for the Biden administration. That's why he's working with all of our global partners to ensure a strong economy.
I was talking about like staples or pens or anything. Anyway, make yourself at home. Let me know if you need anything.
President Biden believes that every American deserves to feel at home in their own country.
No, you're not press secretary anymore, right?
No more questions at this time.
Now, that one tweet isn't the only thing to erupt from Jen's replacement. There's this video from MSNBC where she describes Fox News as racist back in March 2020, which she then shared from her Twitter account.
Fox News was racist before coronavirus. They are racist during the coronavirus. Fox News will be racist after the coronavirus. So there is nothing new here. I think the difference is they are all in on being state TV for Donald Trump. And so they will continue to give them misinformation. The danger is, so yes, you have Asian Americans right now whose lives are seriously in danger.
Huh. Well, at least you didn't parody Mary Poppins. But I remember those days, when the left actually did care about Asian Americans. Not so much anymore. Now that Asian hate crimes erupted and the culprits aren't in MAGA hats, why bother reporting them at all? So as part of her new job, she'll be dealing with all of these racist Fox News reporters, especially our own dumb SOB, Peter Doocy. Oh, he's so racist. It's funny, Psaki's scheduled to leave her job Friday, where she will end up right where her replacement was when she said we were all racist. I call it the circle of strife. Like Shemp and Curly, they just switched roles. Stooges reference, Kat. But I guess that's what Democrats mean by both sides. So will the new face of the administration face questions about her hatred for Fox News? Maybe, but only from people at Fox News. Assaults on the press are another one of those things that can only come from Republicans. But I should point out, we're not racists. We're just kicking all of their asses, and they're out of ideas, so that's why they call us racist. And as long as you're on the right side, meaning the left side, you can say anything you want. But unlike the left, we won't try to stop you. It's the best way to make you look stupid.
Information laundering is really quite ferocious. It's when a huckster takes some lies and makes them sound precocious by saying them in Congress or a mainstream outlet. So disinformation's origins are slightly less atrocious. It's how you hide a little lie. It's how you hide a little lie.
And I am eligible for it because I'm verified. But there are a lot of people who shouldn't be verified who aren't, legit, in my opinion. I mean, they are real people, but they're not trustworthy. Anyway, so verified people can essentially start to edit Twitter the same sort of way that Wikipedia is. So they can add context to certain tweets. So just as an easy example, not from any political standpoint, if President Trump were still on Twitter and tweeted a claim about voter fraud, someone could add context from one of the 60 lawsuits that went through the court, or something that an election official in one of the states said, perhaps your own Secretary of State and his news conferences, something like that. Adding context so that people have a fuller picture rather than just an individual claim on a tweet.
Good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson. Tonight, there is nothing in the world worse than finding out that your deepest fears are justified. That's the nightmare scenario, learning there really is a zombie in the closet. Let's say you're a kid and you've convinced yourself that your parents don't really love you. They claim they do. They say it all the time, usually without looking up from their iPhones. But you can tell they don't really mean it. They don't seem sincere. And then one Christmas morning confirmation, you discover they've forgotten to buy you presents, any presents. They were busy and it just slipped their mind. Instead, they've spent all their time and all their money buying gifts for a kid down the street. So all the things that you asked for, they gave to another 9-year-old you have never met. How'd that make you feel? Well, you'd be crushed, but you would also be vindicated. You would know for a dead certain fact that your parents really didn't love you. They're not even very interested in you. That's how a lot of Americans felt last night watching the House of Representatives approve yet another massive aid package for Ukraine. Nothing against Ukraine, but we could probably use that money here right about now. After 100 years of virtually uninterrupted wealth generation, the American economy appears to be faltering in ways that are scary to anyone who's paying attention. Even people who aren't paying attention can sense there's something really wrong. Lots of people are not working. Those who are working are getting poor quickly thanks to inflation. All of a sudden, everything is wildly more expensive. Have you noticed? We literally have a shortage of baby formula right now. Did you think that would happen in America ever? And yet it is happening. And so is the deadliest drug epidemic in our history. About 107,000 of your fellow Americans, most of them young people who should have had long, productive lives, are instead dead. They have died from drug ODs over the past year. This is the saddest thing that has happened in our country in a very long time. And yet Congress, which claims to run the country, can't be bothered even to acknowledge it, much less do anything about it. Instead, your representatives in Washington just voted to send yet another $40 billion to the Ukrainian oligarchs who paid off the president's son. That's what happened. And it's just the latest check that Congress has cut them. You can add it to the approximately $14 billion they've already spent on Ukraine. That brings the total as of tonight to more than $54 billion. How much is that? Well, for perspective, it is more than we spent per year on average on the war in Afghanistan, a war that began with a direct attack on the United States. $54 billion. That's about as much as Russia, the country, spends on its entire armed forces over the course of a full year. It is a ludicrous amount. And yet Congress happily approved it. In fact, they allocated $7 billion more than Joe Biden asked for. That's how excited they were to do it. So where's this money going? Oh, that's the best part. Congress has decided to fix all of the pressing problems that need to be fixed, except fix them in Ukraine, not here. So the main course of all of this funding from day one has been to secure Ukraine's borders. Because, you know, you can't have a country without borders. They have to be secure. Nancy Pelosi strongly believes that about Ukraine, and so do her friends on the Republican side. So Ukrainian border security is the main goal. Then there's the problem of, quote, food insecurity. Not here, in Ukraine. Food's getting expensive in Ukraine. So we're going to spend $760 million to fix that, just in this check. And not just in Ukraine. Congress was feeling kind of sporty, also added $150 million for something called the Global Agriculture and Food Security Program, because while we're feeding Ukraine, why not feed the rest of the world? We've got more food than we can use. And of course, that will obviously include baby formula too, because kids in other countries need to eat. Then there's another huge chunk of cash to, quote, combat human trafficking. Now, not combat human trafficking in Texas, where it is now ubiquitous thanks to the open borders with Mexico, but to combat human trafficking in Ukraine. Because it's sad what's happening there, but not here. That's not sad. We're ignoring it. There's still more money to make sure Ukrainians have emergency shelter, because apparently more than 1 million Americans aren't homeless tonight. There's $900 million to make sure Ukrainians have access to, quote, entitlement programs, our entitlement programs. They'll need them when they arrive here, as many will. In other words, you can't afford to fill your truck, but you now get to pay the living expenses of anyone who shows up in your country claiming to be from Ukraine. And you will. And then, because paying off your friends is always the real point of these exercises in Washington, there are billions more dollars for Lloyd Austin's former employers in the weapons business. That would include $72 million for something the bill describes as, quote, research, development, test, and evaluation in Ukraine. Now, don't say biolabs, because that's not allowed, but honestly, this is weird. Ukraine is a war zone, and therefore probably not a great place for scientific research right now, but whatever. We're funding some kind of science experiments in Ukraine. No more questions from you. And the bill goes on like this, and on and on. As Congressman Thomas Massie has pointed out, Congress has now spent more money on Ukraine in 6 months than the U.S. government spent on all roads and all bridges in the United States over all of last year. The $40 billion we're sending to Ukraine so they can secure their borders, by the way, is more than double what Joe Biden has asked to fund customs and border security in the United States. One bill, more than double what we're spending this year on our borders. And then, in the middle of this historic drug emergency, and it is, the bill spends more than 10 times the entire budget of the DEA. More than 10 times. Just in case you're wondering how your leaders feel about you. They're not fans at all. And now we know for sure. You should know that every single Democrat in the House of Representatives voted for this bill. That would include even Barbara Lee of Berkeley. Now, if you remember her name, it may be because in 2001, Barbara Lee of Berkeley was the only member of Congress to oppose the war against the Taliban. But a war in Ukraine is a war that Barbara Lee can support. Why? Because there's no potential chance that war could help the United States. Here's her reasoning.
This war is not only about Ukraine. This war is about the rest of the world, and Putin trying to establish autocratic governments throughout the world. And we know that this is taking place through disinformation campaigns, through all kinds of misinformation that's taking place.
Oh, so it's not really about Ukraine. It's about something bigger than Ukraine. Thanks, Barbara Lee, for being dim enough to tell us that, to say it out loud. This is a war on disinformation, which at some point, in some way, is dead certain to be a war on you. No question about it, because you're a font of disinformation, meaning you disagree. But we know for certain that wars against things you can't really identify, against people who don't exist, wars against concepts, one thing we know about those wars, like the war on terror, is they last forever. So it was a little weird to see Tim Ryan of Ohio vote for this. Tim Ryan was supposed to be a working man's Democrat, a guy who cares about bread and butter issues. Tim Ryan represents Youngstown in Akron. Take a look at Akron sometime. It's like a war zone itself. These are the cities that built America, crumbling and desperate now from total neglect. But don't you worry. Tim Ryan is totally committed to rebuilding Kiev. And so is Nancy Pelosi. For Pelosi, funding Ukraine at any cost is more than a foreign policy objective. It's a kind of religious observance.
The brutality of Putin is not just what he's doing in Ukraine, but the impact that it is having on food for the world. So when you're home thinking, what is this all about? Just think about, when I was hungry, you fed me, in the Gospel of Matthew.
Oh, so Jesus wants to send more missiles to Ukraine. And the more missiles we send to Ukraine, the less hungry people are going to be. Wait a second. Wouldn't Jesus want to do everything possible to bring an end to the war in Ukraine? You religious little twit. How dare you quote that book? By the way, there was a time when Nancy Pelosi didn't want to spend billions of dollars to secure a country's border. She said it was wasteful and morally wrong. It wasn't that long ago, by the way. It was April of 2017. See if you notice the difference. She's for spending billions at borders now. She was opposed to it then. What changed? Watch.
The wall is, in my view, immoral, expensive, unwise. And when the president says, well, I promised a wall during my campaign, I don't think he said he was going to pass billions of dollars of cost of the wall onto the taxpayer.
Oh, did you catch that? Border security in the United States is immoral. But Jesus is strongly for border security in Ukraine, and abortion, by the way. It's a sacrament.
On the wrong side of the tracks, my facts indisputable. Following your path is always refutable. Is that a suitable way to portray? Painting on canvas of hip-hop today. Journey to the back of your mind. Sometimes it illuminates the front of your brain. Stay in your lane. The sheer lack of respect is cause for concern. Early morning workout, letting it burn. Better listen close, Confucius say. Bringing this sound from around the way. Lisa, Angela, Pamela, Renee. If they're down for the cause, let them join the fray. Okay, getting it down with no delay. Certified lyrical spice from Bombay. Just like Reader's Digest, my quest is to keep your blood boiling, never controlling. Doo-dee-dum-dum-dum-dum. Let me ease your mind. Take this as your sign. Of those that know, planting my seed, now let it grow. Just let me take you there. Seems that you're going off course, predictable. Lord lost sight of the end game. Turn off the propane, unless the rule of the game is destruction. Can't have a baseline without the percussion. For this discussion, I'm your therapist. Fever is raging without the pre-staging. Reality show drama is the norm. Take cues from Shaolin, Killer Bee Swarm. Took another pause for the cause, regroup. No need to chop up, quantize the loot. Make sure the knot is secure, no back door. Implemented, firewall prevented it from ever making way to the surface. Double the hook line, I do it on purpose, so you can know it's coming from the soul. 18th green, aim for the flagpole. Do it up, let me ease your mind. Take this as your sign. Don't walk away. Never walk away. I got more to say. Left on the side of the road, nowhere to go. Leave it in the minds of those that know. Planting my seed, now let it grow. Just let me take you